Hello and welcome again to another episode with One Starfish, where our mission is to change the world one starfish or one person at a time. As always, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, all the stuff, share. It's really appreciated to get the word out to more people. Today, I'm excited for our guest. Julie Waters is in Washington. She has had 25 years as an HR professional. She's wrote a book. She's authored a book on HR. If you want to hold it up, I think you got it there. For anyone that's... There we go. HR Explained, even pretty color. Looks amazing. Awesome. She's an amazing mother. Her oldest now in university or college, which is cool. So she's doing a good job and getting them on to the next stage of their life, which is super awesome. Thank you so much for being on today, Julie.
Good morning, Angela. It's nice to see you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited. So tell us a little bit about how now 25 years ago you got into HR. What has kept you in HR this long? Why did you decide to write a book? Tell us a little bit about kind of your, you said you work a 9 to 5 to me before. You're also doing some things on the side, want to become a speaker. Tell me a little bit about all of that.
Awesome. How much time do you have? Okay.
Yeah, lots of time.
I was a trailing military spouse at the time. So I don't know if everybody knows what that means, but we move every couple of years. And I actually fell into human resources as an accident. So I was placed as a temp as an assistant in an HR department and like age 25, 26, and thought, oh, this is really cool. I really like this. Had a number of other jobs before that, but had a great mentor in that very first spot. She was super nice and super knowledgeable, and everyone was great. And I discovered, I think, that I'm pretty nosy, which is kind of a perfect spot for human resources. Like I want to walk around and get to know everybody and get into everybody's business a little bit. But it does make people kind of trust me, that since they see me a lot, HR typically has this kind of scary, it's like, oh, HR walked in the room, who's in trouble? But I just walk in the room just to say hi. So every once in a while when I did have to walk into the room, because someone might have been in trouble or needed a little chit chat, it wasn't as scary because I was there all the time.
That's cool.
So in human resources is needed in every industry, in every town. So as a military spouse, that kind of portable career was important. I was able to actually grow my career, where many military spouses are kind of stifled, and they have to start over every time they go somewhere. I was lucky enough to actually move up every time. If I had stayed in one job for 20 years, I might have hit manager at a certain point, and might have hit director, but because I moved, I kind of took those steps earlier than I would have otherwise normally in a one job. So it was really to my advantage to have to move around. I also ended up being able to get my master's degree at one of those spots as well. So it worked for me. I know sometimes it is hard for the trailing spouse to maintain that career. But for me, it was actually to my advantage because I fell into this industry that I really enjoyed. Came back to, after, a number of all those moves, came back to a town near where I grew up, had little kids, wanted to raise them in a place that I guess I knew, and that I knew the quality of schools and all that sort of thing. After having moved around for a number of years, it was important to be able to kind of choose the spot to raise these children. Ended up in a job. I had previously worked for the Military Officers Association for 5 years in Washington, D.C., some lobbying organization, as well as like an affinity group for military officers and their families. They do lobbying also for military members in general. So it's not just an officer thing, but my current boss was a former officer, and so was a member of the organization. So when we met, I was already vetted, I guess, for this job that I'm in now. So that transition was really easy, and it's like we had a commonality. So yeah, it was an easy transition to go into that role as well. In the meantime, while working all those 9 to 5s, I did some speaking both through the Military Officers Association and through the National Military Spouse Network, speaking to military spouses on how to maintain their careers, whether it was picking something that was more portable. And at the time, this is 10 and 15 years ago, it was before remote work was as common as it is now. Mm-hmm. So picking industries and picking following paths that were just more portable. You know, the traditional military spouse jobs are nurses and teachers. It just always has been, because you can work those anywhere. Well, there's so much certification now that it is harder to transition those jobs. So yeah, I'm trying to talk to these groups of mostly women. Wasn't always women. There were men in the mil-spouse groups too, about finding a path that they could have something for themselves as well. Because that was important to me. Like, I wasn't just, you know, a Navy spouse or his spouse or whatever. I had my own thing the whole time. So, and I found that was one of the most important things for my growth. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted that for these people in the audiences as well. So I also, since now I've transitioned into the bankruptcy world, work for a bankruptcy trustee, and I speak to other trustees through the National Association of Chapter 13 Trustees. I talk to other offices about kind of shoring up some HR policies and some discipline, but also stuff like, you know, core values and how to tie those values back to your discipline. And so, yeah, it's been a journey. You make it what you can, and yeah, it's been an interesting life.
Awesome. So what caused you to write a book? What was your thought process? Why did you write a book on HR? Did you find there's a big hole in the HR industry? And, you know, kind of wanted to make it a little bit less confusing for people, or?
Yeah, I think it's focused on, it's called A Practical Guide, HR Explained, a Practical Guide. I can't remember my own title, to human resources for small businesses. And I found that in talking to many of my friends that maybe own small businesses or know people who know people, that they're not big enough to have an HR person. Mm-hmm. Yet if they have a few employees, there's things they need to know. You know, you get to a certain number, particularly in the US, you get to a certain number of employees and you have to comply with certain laws. Right. If you just have a few, there aren't very specific, there's some thresholds.
Laws. Yeah.
Yeah. Just because you only have 2 employees doesn't mean you have to, you know, you can just flout the laws. But so I wanted to give small business owners something they could open at, look at the specific chapter. There's even a couple worksheets in here to build your own, whether it's checklists or policies or job descriptions, as well as a core values kind of worksheet. So they could read it in a way. I've always kind of had a way to explain things to people or put it into an example that is applicable to them and it's easily understandable. So it had been floating around in my little brain for a few years. And finally, through Arte, actually, I met the publisher. His name's Mike Fallett. He's got this great system for those of us who have it in there, but don't have the time or ability to sit down and just type for hours. He's got a pretty good system and getting it on paper and getting it out the door. And so I was really pleased to be able to connect with him and get it down and get it finally done. So
that's cool. I'd have to learn some more there too. So what's your main passion? Like, what do you want to see in the next 5 to 10 years? What's your goal, Julie?
I would like to speak to more to audiences. I've been looking at through Speakers Bureau, through Innovation Women. So I want to plug them as well. They are a Speakers Bureau for mostly women. There are certainly some men in there too, but to try and get more women in front of more audiences. And so through their list of engagements that are available, been applying for stuff through there, getting in front of, I don't need to speak to HR professionals. They all know the same things that I know. I need to speak to small business groups and small business affinity kind of groups. So been looking to, I just want to give people the information. I have it. I was able for a time in my life to give it to this, spouse group that I really felt strongly about because I was in there. And now that I'm in this small business realm, I want to be able to help the small business owners and to be able to move their businesses forward or to get their HR house in order so they can concentrate on what they do and what their passion is. So, I'm really jacked about, I have this niche piece of information. I want to get it out to people because it might be able to help them, not get sued. There's a financial thing behind having good HR. Like, it seems like a cost center. If you in a larger organization, HR is a big fat cost center, but it is a layer of protection against some things that happen. So,
what do you see as a number one mistake that small businesses do make within this realm?
If they're real small, it is knowing the difference between an independent contractor and an employee. And there are high fines. They're pretty big teeth if you mess that up.
Yep.
So
what are some key, if you want to go into like one or two like key differences for someone listening that's like, well, what's the difference?
Mm-hmm.
What are one or two key differences between those two?
An independent contractor will set their own hours, more or less, with the exception of, if you have to have there's like a super secret site that you need to be doing your work at, but they aren't under control hours wise by the person who has hired them. They typically use their own equipment. So if you're hiring an IT consultant to help set up your stuff, they're working on your equipment, but they maybe
have
VPN, their own stuff, their own equipment, their own base of operations, essentially. If say you're in a mechanic shop and you hire someone specifically to work on maybe the newer electric cars, but they're only coming in when you have those cars in, they're working with their own equipment, their own tools, but they're on your site, that maybe is an independent contractor. If you end up having electric cars in all the time and you have them there all the time, now they're an employee because they're there all the time and they're working with the flow of your business, not their own business. So that's essentially is like who gets to say yes or no, who gets to make the decisions. If as an independent contractor, I can say, yeah, I'm not working on that thing, or that's out of my scope. Whereas if you are actually an employee and the boss says, hey, you need to work on this, you figure it out and you work on that. So
yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. And what, so that's one of the biggest things that you see. Is there something else that's really been, that you see as a major blind spot within the like young new businesses to kind of be aware of? That's a really good one. I've heard that one before too, and that's a really good one. Is there something else that's kind of jumped up?
Yeah, I think they're having some set policies at the very beginning, even before you have employees. So when you end up with a couple or 3, 4 or 10, your stuff's already in order. So if you take a little bit of time now and getting it straight, so when you have 10 employees and you have so much business that you had to hire all these employees, you don't have to try and shove the toothpaste back in the tube to try and get your rules all squared away. So, like in terms of what my business hours, what the payroll week looks like. You know, if I'm an office, it's probably Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. If I'm a restaurant, maybe I want my week to end on a Wednesday, because that will affect the overtime hours throughout the weekend when I'm busier. So, also, if you've hired an employee, your first employee, and you've given them, because you don't necessarily know the rules or know better, you're like, yeah, do whatever you want, clock in this. But then by your fourth employee, you have these specific rules in place. Now you're favoring this employee over here. And so there are issues with fairness, that not only just general fairness, but there might be legal issues as well. If, you know, perhaps your that first employee was a white guy, and then you're hiring a woman over here and not treating them as equally, or a person of color over here and not treating them as well as you did this first employee. So it's good to get all the rules in place before you get someone in the door, or in those first couple hires. So when you grow, hopefully, because you're doing this kick butt business now, everything's already done. So I think I guess the short answer to backtrack is unfair treatment, and not on purpose, but just because one of the things I repeat frequently is you don't know what you don't know. And so you don't want to find it out the hard way. So find it out now. So
that makes total sense. And backtracking a little bit, I want everyone to kind of notice, one of the things that I really caught was, you know, Julie talked about how she traveled around from location to location. And a lot of people would look at that as a negative. And she was able to find a positive in it where she moved up. And I just think that's all mindset. And it all comes down to what you look at it. It's not that you just happen to be in an industry that lets you do that. It's because that's what you were looking for. And so can you talk a little bit about your mindset, kind of, I guess, not really to do with HR, but just in general, you know, a mindset of like finding the positive in everything. And, you know, where did that come from, and how do you help grow that?
That's awesome. Thank you for pointing that out. As a sale for getting a new job in HR, you want to be able to say, yes, I've worked all these different places, but I have all this experience from all these different places and can pull in the best practices from all of them to advance this organization. But particularly as a military spouse, you don't have a choice of where you're moving. You know, we were hoping for West Coast. I'm a West Coast girl, and our first duty station was Norfolk, Virginia. And Norfolk, Virginia in 1996 wasn't the coolest place. So it was actually kind of going through a little bit of revitalization. But people have asked me, what's the favorite place that you were? And I look at all of them as something positive. You know, we met great people here, and we had great food there, and we had lots of experiences in this other space. So I do look back at the whole thing. Particularly, I'm from a really small town in Eastern Washington. So a girl from Davenport that has gotten to, you know, live all over the place. You know, I've been in the White House for a bill signing. I've, you know, been on the South Lawn. I got to do a whole lot of things for this small town girl. So I do look back at the whole experience. And even though, yes, now I'm divorced, but my ex-husband and I have a really good relationship, and the kids are always first, and get a lot of actual compliments from all of our adult friends, like, wow, you guys really are doing it right. And so, you know, we can look at each other as positive too, because, you know, he was my best friend for a long time. So
what I want to know is, where did that come from? You know, that looking at everything positively, which you still are, I can tell by you're talking about it. And a lot of people look at stuff negatively. You chose to look at stuff positive. Did that come from childhood? Was that how you were raised? Were your parents really positive? Where did that kind of come from?
I think it is I don't want to be miserable. I don't want to look back at, I don't think it was from childhood, although I was always it's funny watching my daughter now and watching my older sister interact with my daughter, and she does things that my sister looks at her and go like, yeah, you're raising yourself, because the things that drove her nuts as having a little an obnoxious, goofy little sister is, now my kid. So, I've always kind of had a grandmother called me her blithe spirit, kind of a happy countenance. So that's kind of always been there. But I've been around enough people in my life who complain all the time. And for a long time, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, that really sucks, whatever. And now I'm like, what are you going to do about it? What do you want to see happen next? Because I can't have that negativity in my life. I got enough stuff, between taking out the trash and making sure, the lawn's mowed and stuff at work, obviously. And it's like, I can't have the extra stuff bringing you down. So I think it is a mindset of, and you can start, even if you're kind of a negative person now, you can start right now and just with, how am I going to make this better? Or what can I change? Or what's the good I can pull out of it? I've had stuff in my career that I've screwed up, and I have to look back at this failure and say, okay, what have I learned from this? And what am I never going to do again? Because it hurt me last time. So I think it's just, why dwell on the negative? So, but I do think it was just kind of my personality, and being in a leadership position and being a mom. And it's like, you want to keep that level up a little bit just for the people around you, because then it always comes back to you.
And you mentioned just now, like, about your associations, about those around you. You touch on that a little bit, like, how much do you think your associations play a role in kind of where you're at, and how conscious should people be about their associations? And the common question people say is, if I don't want to cut people out of my life, how did you face some of that, and how have you faced some of that?
And the name now escapes me, and it'll come to me like 3 hours from now, and I'll yell it out. But the guy who said you are the kind of accumulation of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So if you're with somebody who's always a downer, that's going to have an effect on you. But yeah, I have absolutely cut people out of my life who, you don't get anything out of it. They're either an emotional kind of suck, or sometimes even a time suck, and there's never anything positive from them. And you don't need that in your life. So whether it's friends or even family members, I've certainly had to kind of slow down some of those, at least the interactions. You can cut them out of your life. You can. It's just biology. For me, the family is the people I've chosen to be around. So, but I am in, the networking group, the RTA group. I have found a larger kind of group of women that I will, everyone's there to support each other. No one's in it just to grow yes, we're all in it to grow our own everything, but we are all also helping each other out. When I was in college, like I said, I went from this really small town to University of Washington, which is, at the time, 40,000 students. I joined a sorority, and so it shrunk down that university experience for me and made it a little more manageable. These women are still in my life today. This is 30 years plus ago, and these are my best friends. These are the women when I'm in jail in Singapore, these are the women that I'm going to call. So I'm not going to call my mom. I'm not going to call my husband. I'm going to call one of these girls, because I know that they'll be there in 24 hours with bail money. So no questions asked.
That's so cool. Yeah. So really, who do you surround yourself with, and are you finding the positive in everything? Because if you're not, then, like, what can you do to start to change that and start to find the positive? Because then when you do, the positive kind of happens. What we think about, we bring about. So it's, it's very good. I love those points. In wrapping up, and I know, make sure you reach out if you have some HR questions, specifically or anything like that. Reach out to Julie, get her book, all of that kind of good stuff. We'll have it all the links in the show notes, of course. But I always wrap up with 3 final questions, and then kind of anything you want to leave our listeners with.
Okay.
So first question is, if someone's wanting to find their purpose, what's one sentence or paragraph you could kind of say to help them find that?
I think I would go with, well, what's your strength? What are you good at? And then, I know that sounds really kind of elementary, but you find your strength. Like, I'm really observant. I can take in kind of what everybody's kind of doing. And whether I'm waiting tables or doing what I'm doing now, or I'm managing people, can take that strength and apply it to a number of things, because you can say, yes, I want to do this with my career path, but career paths don't work like that.
Right.
So, try lots of things and always focus on the thing that you're good at.
That's good. I love that. Number 2, what's, there might be more than one, but what comes to mind? What's your favorite quote and why?
And this goes back to cutting out those negative people in your life. I think it's Maya Angelou. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. So,
yeah.
Also, a lot of Brandi Carlile song lyrics actually hit me pretty good too. About being strong women. So.
I love it. That's so cool. And number 3, what's one word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
I'm a master procrastinator, so the term "if not now, when" is a big one for me. And on a gravestone, on a tombstone, I think that would be really like too late. So
yeah, that's true.
Not now, when?
Right. It's a good one. I like that.
I'm a little morbid. So
it is, but I mean, it's a question to make you think. And then the last thing is, if you run into someone at a coffee shop and they're like, "Hey, Julie, I listened to the podcast. I just getting into HR. Or I'm just getting into whatever." What was something we didn't touch on today that you just think would be really good for our listeners?
I think learn all that you can. Like, talk to people, have conversations, and not just with the people on your level. Go plop yourself down in the marketing director's office and learn about their role and their people, because as HR, you need to know a lot about the operations of the business to make sure you have the right people in the right places. So talk to everyone you can, and of course listen. Sit down in those offices and open your ears. And so
that's good. I like that. Listen to more people. Awesome. Thank you so much. In wrapping up, as always, listeners, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, reach out. Together, if we go change one starfish or one life at a time, together we can change the world. Thank you so much for being on, Julie.
Thanks, Angela. I've been listening and you're doing a great job.
Thank you.